Chapter 17. Wednesday morning. Wednesday morning, Doreen woke up, her body protesting as she forced herself out of bed and into a hot shower. Today, she had to be finished for Penny's sake, and then she wanted to come home and just settle into her own space. It felt odd right now, as if all the men had left some sort of foreign energy behind. Not that the place was full of testosterone or anything, but it just felt like it wasn't her own. Of course, the fact that so much of the furniture had been stripped out also made it feel unusual. When she was finally dressed, she couldn't find any more energy to dance down the stairs. Instead, she dragged her sorry butt all the way down, one step at a time. She was saddened to see Muggs looked exhausted too. "Hey Muggs, we'll only be there for a few hours today." Goliath was lying at the bottom step and refused to move. Using the banister, she hopped over him, wincing as she landed on her feet, the motion jarring up her legs and back. That wheelbarrow and she had not gotten along very well yesterday. This was the most physical work she could remember ever doing in her life. And she needed food, as in a decent amount of food. But she also felt very short on time. She slapped together a large sandwich and sat down with that and a fresh cup of coffee. She'd fed the animals, so they would be good for the trip too. She kept her phone on silent, not wanting to be disturbed with anything else that she had to get done. She needed to focus on Penny's place, and then she wanted to do nothing more than come home and collapse. She'd have said collapse on the couch, but she no longer owned one. She gave herself a head shake and said, "Hey, this is huge for you, so let's just get this job done and move on." She made herself another sandwich to bring with her, because yesterday, she hadn't had anywhere near enough food. And then, with her coffee in her travel mug, she opened the door, and amazingly all the animals perked up. "Come on guys." Thaddeus, however, was looking for a ride. He walked up her arm to her shoulder and tucked in close. She chuckled, and then she thought about whether she needed to reset the alarm, and decided that being tired was no excuse. Still, a lot of china and other items were inside that she had no idea how valuable they were. She also needed to ask Nan if more valuable stuff was around, and get a real answer this time. Particularly among the mess in the garage. She reset the alarms, and then led everybody out the kitchen door. The trip was slow, even though she was trying to push it to get there, but she found it hard to force her legs to move with any kind of enthusiasm. Once there, she put her sandwich and coffee mug down and started in on the bricks. She needed a steel brush, the hose, and a rake, and it took 2 hours to get all the bricks cleaned up and nicely set. She was happy to see the tall lamp in the middle, standing straight and true. The good-sized cement block gave the lamp a secure base. Finally, she was done. She stepped back, wiping her face. She was now covered in mud from the water used to clean up the bricks. She shut off the water and reached for her coffee cup, and then took several steps back to look. So far, she had seen absolutely no sign of Penny. Or of the animals. They'd all hidden in the shade at the side of the house. It seemed like they wanted her to finish this job too. It was nowhere near as much fun as solving cold cases. As she stood here, wondering if the bed was good enough, Penny drove up behind her. She hopped out and said, "Wow, that looks lovely. I noticed this morning just how much that lamp sets it all off." She pointed at the bricks. "I don't know how you got them so nice and shiny. I had no idea they could look like that." "They'll darken once they're dry," Doreen said, "but they're looking pretty good. I'll tidy up the backyard for pictures." On that note, she picked up half her sandwich, munched through it for energy, and when she was done, with Penny having long since disappeared into the house, Doreen grabbed the rake and carefully covered her tracks. In the backyard, she started at the first clump she had removed, and carefully moved dirt and some of the rocks around to hide that she'd just stolen parts and pieces. Then she took the rake and carefully gave the space between some of the larger open areas a bit of a rake to make it look better. When she was done, she could feel her shoulders sagging again. She walked the wheelbarrow back to the garage, putting it where it belonged, and hung up the rake. Then she took pictures of the garage and everything that was in it. Penny came out just then, holding 2 $100 bills in her hand. "As much as I can't afford it, you did such a phenomenal job that I'm delighted. Here." Doreen thanked her and pocketed the money. She knew all about offering and not affording. She pointed to the garage and said, "Are you serious about letting me have this stuff?" "Absolutely," Penny said. "And probably the sooner, the better. It's fine for showings, but I'm sure the realtor would say it would be better if the garage were empty too." "Right," Doreen said. "The question is whether the workbenches are attached or not." She lifted the edge of the first one and nodded. "So these can leave too." "It would make a lot more space in here for whoever buys the house," Penny exclaimed. "So the sooner." And she cocked an eyebrow at Doreen. Doreen chuckled. "Yep. I have to go home and try to sort out my house, and then I'll get into my garage. I presume you're okay if I have a week or two to get George's stuff cleaned out?" "Sooner would be better. If you need some tools like right away, feel free to come back. I don't lock the garage, so anytime you want, come on in. Open up that big door and start moving stuff." Doreen smiled in delight. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "That's a huge help." The two women waved at each other as Penny said, "I've got to go," and headed to her car again. Apparently, there's more paperwork for the realtor to sign. "There's always paperwork for that stuff, but you're good to go for the pictures now." Doreen picked up Muggs's leash, hooked him on, grabbed her travel mug, and said, "I've got to head home myself. And I've got to be back for the photographer in an hour." The two women separated with Doreen heading toward the creek, the animals finally moving with some energy as they realized she was done, and they were heading home. She was fascinated that she had been gifted an entire tool shop. She could already hear her husband's disparaging remarks as to why she'd want it, since she didn't know how to use anything. But maybe it would help a lot if she could have the tools for somebody else to use while working on her house. And she hated to say it, but a part of her thought maybe she could sell some of it and get more money. It made her sound greedy, and that wasn't how she wanted to be viewed. She wondered how to move the entire workshop to her place, including the workbenches and all those boards with the hooks. She should talk to Mac about that. At least she'd taken a ton of photos, so she could put it up in her garage the same way. When she finally got back home again, she propped open the kitchen door for some fresh air and put on more coffee. She washed up, made herself another sandwich, and then slowly walked through her living room and dining room. It really would be nice if she could take out the wall between the two rooms. It depended on how they'd built it though. She didn't know if a retaining beam was up there, if that wall was structural, and she wasn't even sure how to find out. She opened the door to the dining room and walked through. She still had all the dishes to deal with and the sideboard Scott hadn't taken. Yet some of the clutter was gone. She opened the door and walked through to the kitchen. She had a complete circle layout with a laundry room right beside the kitchen. She walked in and opened up the door to the garage. She flicked on the light switch and just stared, groaning. "It would be easier to look at this," she said out loud, "if we could open the big doors." But she would wait for Mac for that. Speaking of which, she heard a vehicle coming up the driveway. She walked out to the front to see Mac parking in her driveway. He hopped out, and he held two items that she could identify through the clear bubble wrap, the snow globe and the vase that Darth had stolen from her place. She smiled. "You guys don't need them anymore? All the photos have been taken for evidence, and they've released these back to you." She held open the door while he carried them in, and they unwrapped both pieces and placed them back on the mantel. "You need somebody who can give you a hand with the little stuff, don't you?" She nodded. "Scott was supposed to send me some names, but I don't think he has yet." She yawned unexpectedly, then apologized. I finished Penny's garden this morning, so I admit that I just want to sit and veg for the rest of the afternoon. Considering your dining room looks like it does, maybe fix that up first. It was in the back of my mind to sort more of that too, she said. Or sorting my bedroom. The more I get cleared out, the more I realize there is more to clear out. You'll get through it, he said in a commiserating tone. I got off early today. Have you eaten? I had another sandwich, she said, but if you're offering food, I'm happy to eat again. He chuckled at that and said, I thought we could take some of that spaghetti sauce, if you haven't frozen it all yet, and turn it into something for dinner. I have a green salad and a sauce dish in mind. Absolutely. Are you staying here until dinner then? No, I can get it started, leave it to simmer, and then come back in a few hours. I'm taking my mom to her doctor's. Is she all right? Mac nodded. Just checkups, prescription refills, that sort of thing. And that was what he did. She watched in fascination as he brought out this big, thick, rich meat sauce he'd made before, turned up the temperature ever so slightly until it warmed up, and then he added some more spices and more tomatoes. Is there enough for more spaghetti? She asked hopefully. He shot her a look. I can pick up some pasta if that's what you'd like. But maybe we'll have that on Friday. I'd love that, she said. And while you're there, can you get me several packages, please? I'll pay you. He just waved his hand at her offer of money. She pulled out the two $100 bills and said, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do to break these. I guess I go to the bank. He looked at them in surprise and she explained, this is how Penny paid me. Well, good for you, he said. But yeah, the bank. Otherwise, one of the big grocery stores will accept them. A lot of the little stores won't take anything that big, in case they're counterfeit. She looked at the money with suspicion. He just chuckled. Hey, that's not your problem, he said. I highly doubt Penny had that money sitting around. She probably just got it from the bank and brought it to you. Maybe, she said, but I would have preferred smaller bills. Money is money, he said cheerfully. True enough, she said, and pushed the money back in her pocket. Maybe I can get a few more loads to Wendy too. I need to see her anyway. She was supposed to call me about my last load, if she didn't accept some of it, and she never did, and I didn't have time to follow up. So just leave this sauce to simmer for a couple hours, Max said. I'll do a little more grocery shopping. He opened the fridge, took a good look, and said, we still have a fair bit here. We just need more pasta. She nodded and he said, I'll see what I can find. He waved a hand and just like that, he was gone. Since she had eaten something, and this was too hot to snack on, which she shouldn't do anyway, but it was so hard because it was like a thick, rich, meaty soup, she grabbed a cup of tea and headed upstairs. The mattress looked so damn inviting. The trouble was, the rest of her room looked like a nightmare. With the dresser and the vanity and the bed frame and night tables all gone, everything was on the floor. She didn't have a place to put a lamp. She literally had nothing left. In the spare bedroom she had two night tables, so she moved one to her master bedroom, shifted the mattress on the floor so it would at least look like it belonged with a nightstand, and, with one of the lamps from the spare bedroom, she could have some light. She stood in the center and looked around. Do I work on the clothes in the closet, or do I work on the stuff in boxes in the spare bedroom? She muttered. She'd moved a bunch of that stuff off the floor in her bedroom into boxes, and then off to the spare bedroom to make some room for the movers. She was just spreading around the mess instead of handling it. But with the dresser out from the back of the closet, she literally had nothing to put small items of clothing into now. That probably wasn't the best idea, was it? But in her heart of hearts, she knew there was no way she wouldn't sell those pieces of a very large and expensive set. Speaking of which, a piece is still missing, she muttered to herself. He said it was the tall boy. Or a high boy. I think either name can be used. I need to keep an eye out for that. She dove into the boxes in her spare bedroom, sorting what she could, pulling out everything she had absolutely no wish to keep, and anything that was clothing, went back into the box to take to Wendy's. Doreen laughed and chortled as she collected a further $183.46. Then she packed up 4 boxes of clothing and set them off to the side for Wendy. She had another 2 boxes of stuff that she hadn't decided if she was keeping. At least she more or less had the floor cleaned up in her spare bedroom. Then she went to her closet. With another double handful of hangers pulled from there, she sorted through them on the bed in the spare bedroom, becoming a bit more of a pro at this process. She went through more pockets, found lots more small change and small bills, chuckling in delight and thinking about how much fun this was, comparing it to her grandmother finding the chocolates in her own grandmother's furniture. Same idea, and probably worth about the same amount to each child at the time. Keeping 2 items, she put 15 more into a pile for Wendy and did it again, and then did it again. By the time she'd finished the front rack, it was time to stop. She'd been so busy sorting that she'd not bothered to count the money, and her bowl was looking mighty abundant. Such a wonderful gift. She checked her watch and thought, I could run to Wendy's right now. Picking up 2 piles of clothes to sell on hangers, she carried them down and laid them over the back of the pot chairs in the living room, went to the car, opened up all the doors and carefully moved the boxes inside, and then rearranged all of the hanging clothing on top. By the time she was done, she could feel her energy sagging yet again. But she could smell the spaghetti sauce too. She walked back in, stirred it and shut it off. If nobody would be here, no way would she leave that fire devil to burn on its own. She feared she'd have no house to come back to. With Muggs in tow, she locked up the other 2 animals and headed to Wendy's. There you are, Wendy said as Doreen walked in. I was expecting to hear from you before now. I've been a little busy, Doreen admitted.